I just click broadcast. Does it? But now it's going to show a notification that we're broadcasting.
It's okay. That's the only way we can do it.
And we're recording.
Yeah, go through participants.
Maybe like we'll wait till maybe 4:01 so people can log in.
Just a little.
Okay. So should I just sent to all panelists and attendees the file for the PowerPoint so they can practice too.
No.
Okay. It's 4 on the dot. I know some attendees are still trickling in, but I think we'll just get started. So if everybody's ready, I'm going to, okay. So hi everyone and welcome to our first webinar. First, I wanted to thank you all for joining us today, especially in this time of uncertainty and as updates have unfolded so quickly. By way of introduction, and for those who haven't met us, I'm Mackenzie and this is Chris. We're 2 of the 5 members of the Sandbox. At the Sandbox, one of our strengths is stewarding the power of connection and community. Mostly here in this space is where the magic happens. We know many of you right now are pivoting your business model, and as are we. So you know how promising to know that during this ever-changing time, we can still come together no matter the platform to feel empowerment and connection to knowledge. So it's really quite amazing to see in such a short turnaround time that how many people have come together today. We're at about 46 attendees so far, so that's amazing. So thank you truly for coming on today. Before diving into this timely discussion, we just wanted to go over a few housekeeping rules as this is our first webinar, so bear with us. We are all learning. As you can see, all attendees are muted. So if you have a question, use the Q&A feature that's just at the bottom of the window. And Josh and Jacklyn of Barriston Law and Janice of HR Performance and Results will be answering your questions during the discussion period that's allotted. So we're so grateful for our sponsor, Barriston Law, to be delivering this important information. And a lot of us are searching for answers right now. So thank you, Barriston. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to Josh Valler and Jacklyn Tuckey of Barriston Law to start off our conversation.
Okay. Well, thank you so much to the Sandbox for facilitating this. I know it's a great resource for a lot of businesses in town, and we're happy to be a part of it, albeit we wish it was under different circumstances. Right now, we're zooming in from my house in Barrie. Our office has moved quickly to address the COVID-19 pandemic in Canada and trying to flatten the curve. So we've been encouraged to work from home, and that's where we're shooting from today. So like Mackenzie said, we do apologize if we have any technical glitches. This is my first webinar from home, so we don't have all the comforts that we would have the Sandbox. But my name is Josh Valler. I'm an associate at Barriston, practicing in the area of employment law and civil litigation. So I've been fielding quite a few calls from clients just kind of wondering what are their rights and obligations both from the employee perspective and from the employer perspective. So it's a pleasure to be here today to talk about our about our experience so far and some of the research that we've done and looking into this matter. With me is Jacklyn Tuckey. She's our articling student. She's been looking into this night and day, pretty much, helping to be of assistance to our clients and to provide peace of mind. And on the phone or with us as well is Janice Leroux from HR Performance and Results. So Janice, just if you want to give a brief introduction of yourself there.
Sure. Thank you, Joshua, and thanks for certainly inviting me to participate today. So as Joshua said, my name is Janice Leroux. I have a business here in Barrie called HR Performance and Results, and we're a full-service HR firm assisting employers with actually in all different areas. Most recently, like Joshua, we've been inundated with calls as it relates to what's going on in businesses. Currently, as it relates to COVID-19, answering questions around the EI sick benefit changes and helping clients work through all of the challenges as it relates to COVID-19. Unfortunately, we are hearing a trend that employers are now looking at short-term layoffs that have been immediately affected with a decrease in revenues as well. So I'm happy to participate today.
So our plan for today is just to give a brief overview of what exactly COVID-19 is. I'm sure a lot of you have been inundated night and day with the news reports and social media reports. So we just want to give a brief overview of what it is, and then we're going to launch right into the rights and responsibilities of as employers, and what your rights and responsibilities are as employees as well. It flows both ways. But we want to get through that part relatively quickly so we can open it up to you for questions and answers, because I know a lot of you will have questions. We all do. It's a rapidly evolving situation. No one has all the answers. If we did, we wouldn't have to do this today. So we're going to do our best to help guide you through that. So Jacklyn's going to take us through a bit of an overview of COVID-19.
Great, thanks, Josh. So we want to preface this by saying that we understand that all of your situations will be drastically different. So this doesn't really constitute a one-size-fits-all piece of advice. This simply summarizes our present understanding of the COVID-19 situation in Ontario. If you do have any specific questions and there are things that you need to address with regard to your business or your employment, then you should seek legal advice. You should also be speaking with medical professionals and IT professionals, as they'll have some answers with regard to how to keep your business operational. We've relied pretty heavily on our IT department over at Barriston. We also think it's very important to ensure that decisions are made in this time based on the most current available public health information, not just speculation. And it's also really important to note that COVID-19 is not an excuse to act against any human rights policies that were already in place or that exist. Employers maintain a responsibility to uphold human rights protections in the workplace, and in making your decisions with regard to asking employees questions or implementing policies, you can't be coming from a place of stereotyping or discrimination. We need to treat everybody fairly the way that you normally would in business as usual situations. So as many of you already know, COVID-19 is a respiratory illness. It's caused by a new strand of the coronavirus. So I've heard a lot of people say, we've had coronavirus around for a long time, this isn't new. It's true, coronavirus is a large family of viruses. So it includes the common cold, bronchitis, pneumonia, it included SARS. This is a new strand, so health professionals are figuring out how to deal with this new issue. It was declared a pandemic by the World Health Organization on March 11th of this year. So that meant that it went from being an outbreak localized to certain areas to being considered a worldwide issue. Common symptoms include coughing, sore throat, fever, shortness of breath, and it will impact different people differently and different populations differently. So we find that the elderly populations and those with compromised immune systems or underlying medical conditions are the most at risk and will have the hardest time overcoming that. So we need to be careful about the spread to those populations in particular. The government is advising us to wash our hands with soap and warm water for at least 20 seconds, and that is considered to be preferable to using alcohol-based hand sanitizer, which should be used just if water and soap aren't an option wherever you are. They're also asking that we practice social distancing, so limiting large gatherings. I believe now they're asking that we keep gatherings below 10 people, keeping 2 meters distance between yourself and other people. So there are 3 modes of transmission of the COVID-19 virus: large droplets, contact with contaminated surfaces, and then also airborne droplets when you're speaking to someone, just the moisture that is automatically coming from your words. The 2-meter buffer is expected to sort of mitigate the risks of passing those droplets on to another person. So COVID-19 originated in Wuhan, China in 2019, late 2019, and the first presumptive case was recognized in Ontario on January 25th of this year. So as of March 15th, there have been 153,517 globally confirmed cases and 341 confirmed cases in Canada, 146 in Ontario. That was as of Sunday.
And that number has continued to increase despite active measures by the provincial government, including declaring a state of emergency today.
So Canadians are advised in this time to avoid all non-essential travel outside of Canada. And I'm sure all of you heard the announcements where the border is being more or less shut down. Ontarians are being advised to self-quarantine for 14 days after they return from travel outside of anywhere outside of the province, not just the country. COVID-19 is also reportable under Ontario's public health legislation. So if any cases are found to exist in the workplace, an employer is required to immediately contact the Department of Health or a known medical official to advise them of this so that they can take mitigating action. Employers are also required to report all occupational illnesses, which includes COVID-19, to the Ministry of Labor within 4 days. And employers are required to notify their Joint Health and Safety Committee or Health and Safety representative of the union if applicable. So identifying a patient with COVID-19 as an employee isn't the end of the line. You need to be taking steps to advise the government and advise other bodies of the existence of the virus.
So I'm going to jump in a little bit to the legal obligations for employers. So as many of you are likely aware, there is a piece of legislation in Ontario called the Occupational Health and Safety Legislation. So pursuant to that legislation, employers must exercise due diligence in ensuring that employees are safe from hazards in the work environment. Employees, and the basis is to keep your employees safe. That's the most important mandate that we can have as employers, is to ensure that when your employees show up to work, that they come to do so in a safe work environment. And correspondingly, their employees have a right to refuse to work in conditions that they reasonably believe to endanger them. So COVID-19 currently may constitute a reasonable ground for those for whom it is a reasonable foreseeable risk, unless it's part of their job, i.e. nurses, doctors, frontline medical professionals. An employee's perception of risk is not always reasonable for refusal, but it does warrant investigation. So pursuant to the due diligence, employers must demonstrate that the employee has identified and employer has identified and addressed foreseeable concerns responsibly. Reasonableness depends on the information available to the employer and the gravity of harm to be avoided. So today, in light of the current situation globally, COVID-19 would definitely fall within that piece. So it's really it's incumbent upon employers to take active steps to ensure that they're producing a safe and healthy work environment for their employees. That's why you see provincially, there's been a mandate from the provincial government to shut down bars and restaurants and public gatherings of 50 or more plus people. So you see really active measures right now from the government in direction from the provincial government on what employers can and cannot do. But we can go even further than that. Workplaces regularly employing more than 20 workers are required under the OHSA to have a joint health and safety committee. If an employer refuses work due to safety concerns, they must report that to the employer, who must investigate the presence of a worker joint health safety committee member. If the matter is not resolved through investigation, the employer shall notify an inspector who will investigate the concern with the employee, and JHSC member before issuing a written decision. The OHSA definition of employer includes contractors and subcontractors. I mean, if you look at this test and the obligations of the employer, it seems to be rather bureaucratic and drawn out. You need to appoint an investigator, you need to investigate. We really encourage employers right now to take active steps on their own. I mean, if there's any sort of threat, if one of your employees is coughing, we'll get into a little bit more, but I mean, you need to take active steps, because with the spread of COVID-19, we don't have time to go through all that. You need to trust your employees. You need to really take active steps to protect them and their health. So recommended steps for OHSA compliance in the normal circumstances, and we say that it would apply specifically to this, is identify, assess, and address the risk. So update your information on COVID-19 and your preventative measures. Engage the JSHC, key provincial health directives, monitor government travel advisories, contact your public health official. Just stay up on top of the information as it continues to evolve. Update written policies and procedures. So review your work procedures, interaction with employees, clients, and visitors. Lots of people will have clients that come to visit their office. With us, we've taken active steps to to really look at, okay, almost like an interview, ask your clients where they're coming from, if they visited one of the hotspot countries in recent days, in the last 14 days, if they're exhibiting any one of the symptoms, because it's really incumbent upon all of us to take active steps to protect ourselves, clients, employees, employers, visitors. And if, at the end of the day, if they have one of the symptoms or they meet one of the criteria, just ask them to stay home or see if there's other arrangements that you can make. Zoom, like we're doing today, phone call works, email works. So the next step is to prepare a written policy regarding sanitation, meetings, working from home, travel supplies, IT requirements, and insurance. The third is train employees regarding the policy and procedures. So we've managed to implement this at Barriston, where we have the capability of having a lot of our employees work from home. So with that comes work from home policies, IT policies. So we've really worked around the clock and our IT team has been wonderful on this, putting us in a position where we're able to work from home and then coming up with policies to help us work from home. And we would encourage employers, if you have the ability to do so, or at least come up with policies that, once again, protect your employees. Number 4, supervise, monitor, and communicate. And finally, review, revise, and restart. So like we've all seen with COVID-19, the situation is constantly evolving. It's fluid. There's no one-size-fits-all. You need to look, as the updates come from the public health officials, from the government, review and adapt. And just Janice, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, no, I absolutely would agree. I think certainly since last Thursday, when they announced the school closures, companies need to, if they don't have business continuity plans in place, they need to not wait any longer and start putting procedures in place in terms of the next steps as it relates to obviously the quarantine, self-isolation, procedures around how to accommodate employees as it relates to if they need to stay home and take care of their children for the next 2 weeks, and certainly any procedures around the working from home option, and in the eventuality of a second order from the Premier where they shut down all non-essential businesses, there needs to be a protocol in place as it relates to that too as well.
Yeah, and I know in the legal community we've really started working together as well. So if you have, competitors or colleagues or associates that run businesses similar to yours, or even contacting your bank as well, just making sure that there is a continuity policy in place, at least that one office isn't stranded, or it's really a good opportunity for us all to come together and adapt to the situation cohesively. So part of this is communicating with employees. So if we're going to have employees work from home or work remotely, or even if we need them to take some time off in the most unfortunate circumstances, we need to have their updated contact information. So it's accessibility not only for work purposes, but for information transmission in the event that a potential contamination is traceable to that employee as well. So it just allows us to stay on top of things. It allows employers and employees to have open communication, because it is a scary time. And I think it's really important for employers and employees to have that open line of communication to see, okay, if we do need to have a temporary layoff, have a dialogue with your employee, leave it open to have open communication with your employee. Some more information that you may require is travel history in the previous 2 weeks and travel plans in the upcoming months. Now that, once again, demonstrates the fluid nature of what's going on right now. It doesn't appear that there would be any travel plans in the upcoming month, at least, with the federal government shutting down the borders. But travel history in the previous 2 weeks is really important. I mean, and as Jacklyn mentioned earlier, there is a mandate from the government federally now and provincially requiring those who have traveled in the past 2 weeks to self-quarantine for 14 days. Capacity to work from home, should it be required? So do they have a personal computer that they can use, internet, phone, scanner, printer? Disclosure regarding symptoms indicative of the virus or contact with anyone who has the virus or has traveled to an affected area. This, again, is constantly moving. We're seeing more community outbreaks as opposed to travel outbreaks and contact outbreaks. So, but it's important for us to stay on top of it, to, once again, have that dialogue with an employee, make them feel safe as if they can come to you, because if they're worried about losing their job or they don't know what's going on, they may try and show up with that cold. It could just be a cold, but we don't know at this point. It's better safe than sorry. Information that they should provide to you should remain confidential as appropriate. Now, there may be times where it needs to be disclosed to the public health official or trace their steps if they are contaminated. But to the extent it is at all possible to keep this information confidential, please do so. And don't play favorites. Ensure questions are asked of all the employees. Doesn't matter if if they're the janitor, if they're the CEO or VP, these questions need to be asked, and we all need to do our part.
Now, can I add something, Joshua, to that list there?
Yep.
Okay, because we're also advising employers to either in their memos that they're sending out to their employees or in their procedures, that any employee who has been in close proximity with someone who has tested positive for COVID-19, that they're required to report it immediately to the employer. We're also highly recommending that that employers also ask their employees if they are caring for what would be considered a vulnerable family member, so someone who has a compromised immune system, that that they openly talk to them, their manager, supervisor, about that, as well as any employees who have themselves a compromised immune system, so that they can put the measures in place to protect them.
Yeah, and we get, like, and Janice, it would be great to have you chime in on the next slide as well, because we get into that, and I think those are really important things as well, because, I mean, as you said, like, the last thing we want is for employees to get it at work and then take it home to their parents or someone who has a compromised immune system. I mean, these are scary times, but if we all do our part, flattening the curve is the #1 priority. So the other thing that we've come up with too is prepare and revise a written communicable illness policy. So as Janice said, those are really good examples of the things that you can include in the policy, and communicate that policy to the workforce and uniformly enforce it. So it provides legitimacy to the actions of the employer and guidance to the employees. And as Janice was getting into earlier, part of the things that you can include are requirements to notify of any travel plans or their spouses or partners or roommates or anything to an area subject to a travel notice. Like I said earlier, this is likely changing with the travel ban that's in place. Requirement that employees who have or may have that illness seek medical treatment and follow their physician's recommendations. Requirement that symptomatic employees not enter the workplace for a period recommended by a medical professional. Overview of entitlement to paid and unpaid leave available to those affected by the illness. Confirmation that the employer may limit travel for business purposes to approved areas. I would even go as far as to say cancel travel for the time being. I think that decision is going to be made for us by the government if it hasn't already. Confirmation that the employer will take reasonable precautions based on the most current medical and public information available. So the other thing too that as employers you can take and to really protect your employees and to protect your workforce is limit the size and availability of in-person meetings. We're on Zoom today. It's a great sort of mechanism to stay in touch with your your employees if you're able to do so. Stay in touch with your clients or business partners or people that you rely on. Facilitate work from home where possible. I realize it's not going to be possible for everyone. But in cases where it is possible, that's something that you should look to identify and implement. Identify key employees and departments necessary for the operation of your business. Identify key functions that could be potentially performed by employees or teams in other locations.
In addition, I was just going to add to Josh that the government introduced an online self-assessment tool yesterday. So we're recommending that the online self-assessment tool link is sent to employees along with the public health department phone number and along with the local hospital phone number too as well.
Now, that's actually a really good point. So I don't know if the Sandbox team can do this, but we've made our slides available to the attendees today. Perhaps we could provide those links to those who are on the call or on the Zoom conference. So I'm getting the indication that that's possible. So thanks, Janice. That's great.
Okay.
Continue with the adjustment of the workplace. Expedite absence requests. So eliminate the requirement for a doctor's note. In fact, the new legislation that's about to go forward from the provincial government is that as employers, you can't ask for a doctor's note with respect to COVID-19 or suspected cases. Be flexible regarding the vacation time for those who had vacation booked. Encourage employees to stay home if they feel unwell. Send employees who are exhibiting symptoms of the virus, send them home. If refused, direct them to see a doctor, and if they're eligible for COVID-19 screening, request that the employee disclose those results. Limit the spread of information about absent employees to confirmation of absence and expected return date. Now that's for non-unionized workforces. Unionized workforces should review their CBA or collective bargaining agreements to ensure that they remain in compliance and adhering to an obligation to develop a response consultation with the union. I don't know if, Janice, if you have anything that you want to add to that component?
No, I think that covers everything.
Okay. So the next part of the discussion is with respect to existing employee relief. And now I know that's really key for a lot of employers. I mean, no one could have predicted this. It's unfortunate, but it is happening and it is here. And the next question that you have is, how can we protect our employees? You know, no one wants their employee not to be able to afford groceries or rent. And we have promises from both levels of government right now that, you know, no employee will have to miss, or no Canadian or Ontarian will have to miss their rent or grocery bill. But as employers, you want your hands-on, you want to know what you can do. So, and I know Janice has some really good ideas that she'll be able to provide to us as well. But employers may extend the use of vacation time and or banked lieu time, but only with the employee's request. So if your employee wants to use their vacation time to see, okay, in 2 weeks, are we going to be back at work or in the office, work with them on that. Unionized employees may be entitled to pay or benefits. You know, unpaid leave of absence and employers' issuance of a record of employment. So the federal government has waived the standard 1 week waiting period for employment insurance conditions of but eligibility conditions remain unclear. Employees may be eligible for short-term disability insurance, and the basis for that, and that's still a question mark, but relying on the 2003 SARS outbreak, the Ontario Human Rights Commission said that SARS should be treated as a disability under the Ontario Human Rights Code. Employers may pay to maintain employees' insurance during temporary layoff if allowed by the insurer. Employees who are ill or need to care for ill family members may be entitled to paid time off pursuant to contracts. Alternatively, unpaid time under employment standard legislation. So, and we'll get more into the legislation being rolled out by the Ford government very shortly. Janice, on that, did you have anything else that you want to add?
Yeah, like as it relates to, are you able to go back to the previous slide, Josh? Yep. Yes, okay, that's great. So getting lots of questions around the employment insurance program under the federal government as it relates to sickness benefits. And so just so everyone's aware, we've always had EI sickness benefits in place for employers if they do not have a group insurance short-term disability plan in place. And the EI waiting period, which a while back used to be 2 weeks, they changed it to a 1 week waiting period. The EI sick benefits is up to a maximum of 15 weeks. And so what they've done over the last week is they've waived the 1 week waiting period so that an individual who has been requested to be on quarantine that they can immediately collect unemployment insurance, and the code that you would use would be sickness benefits. So you would produce a record of employment, and if you can expedite it for the employee, that would be great. You can submit it online, and then they would be eligible to collect for the 14-day quarantine EI sickness benefits. It's, as Josh said, it's rapidly changing situation, and we're anticipating that that may change as well, and may broaden the scope of who could be included in that. There was a Toronto Star article today that stated that that the sickness benefits would apply if an employer requested someone to go on self-isolation. But I'm hesitant to say that that's the case, because if you go on the federal government site, they have not updated the information, and at this point it still states and uses the words quarantine self-isolation by a public health official. So as Josh said, again, it's a rapidly evolving situation, and so you know, it's we're doing our part with our clients as well to keep them updated if that changes.
Yeah. Thanks, Janice.
Okay.
There was also rotating vacation time that you had mentioned before, correct?
In terms of, okay, so other alternatives, actually, as it relates to short-term disability insurance, anybody who has group insurance in place and actually has a short-term disability policy, I would highly recommend you call your insurance company to see if that they're waiving the waiting period. So for employees to be eligible for short-term disability insurance, there is waiting periods in all group insurance plans. I got a notification from one company today, I think it was Equitable, where they are looking at waiving the waiting periods, but you would have to contact your group insurance at this point to find out if that's the case for your employee group.
Okay.
Yep, go ahead, Josh.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
And then there's certainly there's other alternatives that you can use too as well. If it's impacting your workforce, where you have to look at potentially decreasing your level of staff, there is what's called a work share program through the federal government. And so I can certainly send the links and our fast facts to the Sandbox team, and so that they can get that out to all the participants as well, so they have current information around the work share program too. Yeah.
And thank you so much, Janice. And so I just want to get into a little bit about the proposed job protection legislation introduced yesterday by Premier Ford and Minister McNaughton, who's the Minister of Labor, Training and Skills Development. So if passed, this would immediately provide job-protected leave for employees in isolation, quarantine, or caring for children because of school or daycare closures. The proposed legislation would provide job protection for employees unable to work for the following reasons: under medical investigation, supervision, or treatment for COVID-19, acting in accordance with an order under the Health Protection and Promotion Act, in isolation or quarantine, acting in accordance with public health information or direction, directed by an employer not to work, providing care to a person for a reason related to COVID-19, you know, at school or daycare, or someone elderly in their family, or even a loved one. So that's what's on the books. I checked today. I still haven't received or seen the actual wording of the legislation. So that's something we're going to stay on top of, continue to monitor, and see what the actual wording is, because that will really, really matter to employers and employees alike. I think the gist of it, though, is that if you do have an employee, or if you are an employee who is, you know, experiencing these symptoms or falls within those categories, you know, stay home. You're not going to lose your job. And if you're an employer, you can't get rid of your employee. You can't terminate them on those grounds. So I think it's really important that we once again work together, then to try and flatten the curve. And if you do have an employee, or if you are an employee, stay at home. You're not going to lose your job.
And Joshua, I think what is also, oh, you already have that. I was just going to say it's retroactive to January 25th, which is critical too.
Yeah, and like Jen said, it's retroactive, but also you don't have to provide a medical note to take the leave. And so as far as I'm aware, and I don't know how they're planning on rolling this out, the provincial government's also reviewing current access and eligibility emergency assistance available through the Ontario Works program to help those who aren't able to buy their groceries, pay their rent, the basic necessities of life due to the impacts of COVID-19. So the government's looking at ways to roll that out. I guess the only thing I can say is stay tuned. I continue to look up what measures they're looking to enact or roll out. So as soon as we hear something, we'll be sure to pass it along. The big thing takeaway too is the requirement not to have a medical note produced. It's just, and that was another effort by the Premier to ensure that, sick employees aren't coming to work or not going to get medical treatment. Right now, they're really trying to isolate this thing, and to get a medical note would be counterproductive to that. So, got to trust your employees, and if you're an employee, don't go out. Just take care of yourself. So, Jacklyn's going to talk a little bit about what we've done at Barriston to try and flatten the curve and get this under control, at least from our local level. So, go ahead.
So although we are broadcasting this from Josh's house, the firm is still fully operational. So we've had to sort of implement some practices and run some mitigation on our end. So we're working as of today on a voluntary work from home basis. So we've got people who have the capacity to work from home and who want to do so working remotely, so that we're limiting the number of people in the office. And again, we're lucky to have a tech department that's been able to set us up with that, and we're lucky to have positions where that's often possible. For some people it's not, and we've got a lot of people still in the firm. We've heard of other firms and other areas where they're sort of taking turns coming into the office, so that they're reducing the number of people in the office every day. So for example, if it were a legal clerk, they would have a few of them come in every Wednesday, get all of the work that needs to be done in office done, and then go home the rest of the week and be working remotely. And so there are different ways to be flexible about this in just reducing the number of people at your business so that you can reduce the spread of the virus. Again, hosting presentations and meetings via internet, such as this one, canceling events which require unnecessary gatherings. So we had a meeting planned with all of our lawyers, and even though we expect that anyone who was symptomatic would advise us, we figured it was better not to have everybody all together at this point in time, and we'll proceed at another time. We've increased sanitation stations and improved the sanitation of meeting rooms before and after the meeting. So everything is being scrubbed constantly, including our hands. We've got sanitizers everywhere. We've got soaps, signs up reminding people of good sanitation practices. We've got email signatures requesting that the recipients of the email not enter the office if they're symptomatic of COVID-19, and advising of our specific capacity to accommodate clients electronically. So letting people know that we can do signings via the internet, and we can deal with things online or by phone or at a later date if it's not an urgent matter. And again, we were fortunate enough to have advanced preparation of the technological capacity to work from home. So a big part of this is being on top of things and preparing as much as you can in advance with implementing these policies and getting your tech in line, so that you're not trying to scramble and catch up if something happens to affect your business at a later point. And then also keeping firm-wide email updates and open communication.
I think the last one is probably the most important. It's one that we can all do. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of changing circumstances. So just communicate. I think communication is the biggest thing is between the relationship of employer and employee. The more honest you are and the more open you are and the more transparent you are about the steps that you're taking, and the more honest and open the employee is, the better we work together. Janice, I don't know if you have anything that you want to add to best practices.
Yeah, I think certainly what we're recommending for all leaders, for all organizations, that they need to instill a sense of calmness, because employees are panicking, and so they're looking to their leaders to really kind of give them reassurance that their organizations and the plans they have in place from a business continuity perspective are going to carry them through this. So I think it's really critically important. Obviously, it depends on your state of your business, but it is critically important that as the leaders of these organizations that you send and have frequent communication meetings with your employees to keep them up to date with the evolving situation. If you are all working and you have your team working remotely, there's a lot of technology solutions to help you with communication. And so you could even hold a town hall meeting. Obviously we're on, I think it's Zoom today. I've been on so many different ones today, but there's definitely technology solutions to still continue and to help you from a communication perspective. We also advise from a best practice perspective, if anybody goes off on quarantine or off on a short-term layoff or the EI sick benefits, that you set up regular intervals for like touch points to touch base with the employees to find out how they're doing, and you keep in contact with them. Like, I think what's crucial is that all businesses need to understand and appreciate that this can have a dramatic impact on our ability to retain staff, and so we need to make sure that we are doing everything we can to certainly retain our employees, especially when they're off on a short-term leave. So those would be my key recommendations in addition to this.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Janice. So there's a couple more slides, but those mostly have to deal with breach of commercial contract. I believe the PowerPoint has been circulated or will be circulated. So what we're going to do, rather than get into that, is perhaps open it up to Q&A.
Okay, so our first question is, if an employee wants to work from home for non-virus reasons, such as lack of daycare, are employers required to provide them with equal worker pay?
So I think the message we got from the Ford government yesterday and today through the proposed legislation is that, yes, you know, if schools were canceled, daycares are likely to be canceled. That's not a basis for terminating them. Whether or not you have to pay, I don't think you do. And Janice can correct me if I'm wrong, but from my understanding is that you can require them to use their vacation days allotment, or they can apply for EI. So Janice, I don't know if you want to touch on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are different options on how you can handle this. I think if you've got a policy in place as it relates to personal days, as it relates to if they've been accruing lieu time in exchange for being paid out overtime on a weekly basis, so the accrual of lieu time, and then you've got vacation time. So you could certainly allow them to use that at this point, because as the government said, it was a 2-week shutdown after March break. So you could certainly allow them to use that. And then if it's going to be a longer period of time, then you may be then looking at issuing a short-term layoff for your staff as well. And then obviously if it's, your employees could certainly take it as unpaid leave.
Yeah.
The next question is, what code would we put for EI benefits for employee layoff, since we're forced to close our licensed child care center today? All staff are being laid off.
Janice?
Yeah. Okay. So, so in terms of the licensed daycares and restaurants, we've had spas. There's a number of establishments that have been closed as a result of the order today from the Premier. If the intention is to recall your staff, then there is what's called the short-term layoff under the Ontario Employment Standards Act. And if your intention is to recall and it's a temporary layoff, it's a recall period of 13 weeks unless you're going to keep benefits in place. And there's a few more details as a result of that. I'm just going to give you a high-level summary. Then you can certainly continue it past that. There are some obviously legal, potential legal consequences or liability as a result of that, but we would recommend that if you're not permanently terminating them, it's just use the code for short-term layoff on the record of employment.
And just, you can't use that as an excuse to get rid of an employee that you don't like or or use that as a reason to get rid of them. A short-term layoff means you have to call them back at some point. So that's very important to remember.
And if you decide not to call them back, then you're required to pay notice of termination pay, and then you meet the severance obligations under the Employment Standards Act as well.
And potentially the common law as well, if there's not a written employment.
Yes. Yeah.
We have a couple of questions about small businesses being regulated to close by the government. The first question is, how do we deal with staff who are employed hourly?
I don't, Janice, why don't you answer that one? Because I don't think there's really a difference, but in terms of hourly or salary.
No, and I'm not sure, I'm sorry, can you read that question again? I didn't hear it.
For small businesses being forced to shut down by a government body, how are they to deal with staff who are hourly employees?
Yeah, I might need a little bit more clarity around that question, but as it relates to payment type, so whether someone's salary or someone's hourly, or whether they're full-time or part-time or casual, you would certainly treat them the same as it relates to you know, the applicability of whatever policies you're putting in place. But I would need a little bit more clarity on what they mean by, you know, how do they treat part-time employees?
Yeah, so in that question, I guess the question asker can, my contact information is on the slide deck, and I know Janice's information will be available. So if you do want to reach out, and if you have any further questions, or if we haven't been able to get to yours today, please do reach out. We are still operating. We're still able to answer questions for clients or for individuals who do have these pressing concerns. So if you could email Janice or myself with that question, because it's important, with some more clarification, that'd be great.
And the next question with regard to small business closure is, if a small business has been regulated to close and has to lay off their staff, is their EI claim subject to a 1 week or 2 week wait? That might be a question for.
Yeah, right now, so they're asking about the waiting period, correct?
Yes.
Okay, right now, yeah, right now at this point, they've only waived the 1 week waiting period for the EI sickness benefits. But the situation is rapidly changing, so that may be in the works to change and eliminate the 1 week waiting period. But at this time, given the latest information I have, I don't know if they will be doing that.
Yeah, I don't even think they know at this point, but there will be updates. There will be updates, I'm assuming daily or every other day, with respect to EI benefits. And I believe the Liberal federal government is going to be releasing a stimulus package that will deal with issues like this and clearly identify what is included and what the employer's rights are and what the employee's rights are with respect to funding and benefits. Yeah,
the one recommendation I would have everyone do now, just to prepare for if that does occur where they require non-essential businesses to close down, what I would recommend you do is you either go into access your payroll system or contact your payroll provider and ask them the question if you can produce mass amounts of record of employments. I know I was speaking to a client today, and they actually have the ability to, instead of doing individual record of employments, they could do a group of record of employments. And if you're looking at laying off, you know, businesses that have 50 employees, it can be a time-consuming process. So it's good if you get prepared now and find out how to do that by contacting your payroll provider.
Yeah, just to echo Janice, it's way easier to be over-prepared than under-prepared. And we would encourage that with your employees as well. It will work well for everyone if you do know, or at least have a plan in place. And that goes back to Janice's point on continuity.
Next question is, how will the child care responsibility be classified for EI purposes? Is it part of sick benefits with the waiver?
Janice, did you want to take that one as well?
Yeah, I don't, they still, as of like literally 15 minutes before this webinar, I haven't seen any latest updates as it relates to including it for the childcare. I've heard some, you know, stirrings that they may do that, but at this point, we don't have that information.
Yeah, right now, I think the biggest thing is the childcare is protected. So if you have to take time off to care for your child, you're not going to lose your job for that. in terms of compensation under EI or other forms of compensation, short-term disability, there is no clear answer. And as we've been echoing throughout the entire webinar, it's fluid. It changes almost on the hour, every hour. So we'll continue to keep ourselves apprised on that. But unfortunately, we don't have all the answers because the decision makers don't have all the answers either.
The next person has 3 employees in the midst of their 3-month probationary period and would like to know whether you expect any changes to this new employee evaluation period.
That's a good question. I don't think there would be any changes to this new employee evaluation period. I think the 3-month period would be the 3-month period. You have to go to the terms of your employment agreement with the employees. If you need to let them go due to job shortage or just not availability of work or funds, I think that's a decision you'll need to assess at that time. Janice, I don't know if you want to chime in on that.
Yeah, like I think what the person's maybe referring to is under the Ontario Employment Standards Act, under 3 months of service, you're not required to pay notice of termination.
Yeah.
But as Josh said, if you've got an employment agreement in place, you got to check your termination clause and how that's written. I have not seen or heard any proposed legislation that they're going to change any of the requirements under the termination obligations under the Employment Standards Act.
Yeah, and that needs why we're waiting for the legislation too, because the proposed legislation that we've gone through, that's all that anyone has, that information, what's protected, but they haven't gone into the nuance as to, okay, what happens in situation A if someone's still under probationary period. That's something that's going to need to be fleshed out a little bit before we have the answers.
Does the proposed provincial legislation cover job protection and financial compensation for full or part-time employees, such as servers, of restaurants and bars that have been ordered to close?
My understanding of the proposed legislation is that it only provides job protection. There is no plans in place so far from what I've been able to see and aside from what we've discussed to provide compensation or requirement to provide financial compensation. Janice, have you heard anything differently?
No, I'm absolutely, I've heard the same thing you have heard, Joshua. The only current protection that employers have that had to lay off their staff today would be, again, producing the record of employment and checking off the code for a short-term layoff. Like that is an option that's currently available, and then employees can collect 55% of their earnings up to the EI weekly maximum, right? So.
Yeah.
Okay. If an employer has been required to self-isolate, is there any help in relation to a sick leave for the employer?
That's a great question for the employer. Well, you know what? It's interesting. I just got an email from a client because as employers, there are some special provisions under the the employment insurance program. But if you haven't paid paid into your EI premiums, like most business owners or any relatives that are related to the business owner, they're not getting deductions off their paychecks as it relates to EI premiums, right? So you wouldn't be able to collect short-term layoff if you haven't contributed through EI premiums.
There is, from what I'm hearing, rumors or speculation from the federal and provincial governments, and I don't think these are far-fetched, that there will be included in the stimulus package relief for small business owners or business owners should they require to go into self-isolation as well. So we're staying tuned to that, seeing what this economic package looks like, because it is going to be geared to ensuring that Canadian businesses and Ontario businesses are going to be able to continue to run. And especially in light of the fact that coronavirus doesn't discriminate between employers and employees, it affects everyone. So we need to have a plan in place for the employers as well.
This one looks like another question for Janice. If your company is larger than 20 employees, but your office is less, do you need a joint health and safety committee?
So so the requirement is between 6 and 19 employees, you're required to have a worker health and safety representative in place. If you're between 20 and 50 employees, you're required to have a joint health and safety committee, one worker rep and one management rep, and they both have to be certified. If you have 50 plus employees, you need to have 4 members to your committee, 2 worker reps and 2 management reps.
Okay, thanks, Janice. Do we have to know the recall date for the short-term layoff?
I think that's coming, Janice, that's coming from an employer that just doesn't know how long the layoff is going to be. And I think that really depends on the facts of the coronavirus and the containment efforts.
Yeah, like I would agree. You know, at this point, they could do a short-term layoff. The recall period, if you're not going to continue benefits, is 13 weeks. And so we always advise employers that, like, in around the 10th to the 12th week, for them to know whether or not they're going to recall. If they're not going to recall, then it turns into a termination.
Yeah. And the termination component is similar to any sort of wrongful dismissal or termination, and that's going to continue to evolve as well. There's a lot of legal nuance to that, so just that's something I would encourage you to stay on top of. Seek out legal advice to kind of walk you through that, or contact Janice. Janice's team does a wonderful job with helping employers prepare as well, just to walk you through, okay, what's next? How do I minimize my liability?
The next person would like to know more about work share, in particular, whether the situation is that the government will top up the shortfall of employee wages. And Janice, this is something that I think you had mentioned.
Yeah, they do have, they did make some changes to the work share program to include the COVID-19 virus. So if businesses are affected by a downturn in their business as a result of COVID-19, they can still apply for the work share program. I can send that information so that you can get it out to the participants. There is an application process. I had a team member try to get on the phone today to see if they're planning on eliminating the application process, but we weren't able to get through to them today, but I'll send you the link for that.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so I think, sorry, Jacklyn, I think we only have time for one more question before we have to wrap up. But hey, this is like, we're getting tons of great questions here. This is a really important issue, and we want to be here to help anyone that does have these questions. So like I said, our contact information will be made available to everyone. Feel free to contact me. We'll do our best to get back to you as quickly as possible and see if we can help you out there. But I think the last question, and this is one that I've gotten quite a bit lately, is can an employer restrict employee movement during unpaid break periods while at work? For example, not going out for lunch to restaurants. I think that's a unique question that is unique to the coronavirus, and we go back to the Occupational Safety and Health Act. You know, you have an obligation to ensure that your employees are safe. So, does that mean that you can restrict their every single movement if they're on their time off? Likely not, but if they start exhibiting symptoms, you can, as an employer, say, direct them to go get medical advice or recommendations. You know, if they've traveled or had exposure to someone that does have COVID-19, once again, you can insist upon that, because it's your obligation as an employer to ensure that your workplace is safe. So you need to follow the 5 recommendations that we set out to do your own due diligence. Otherwise, you could face liability for that. Janice, I don't know if there's anything you want to add as kind of the last couple minutes.
Yeah, no, I would agree with everything you said, Joshua, in terms of that piece. I think it's just following the proper protocol and ensuring everybody's treated fairly. Right now, I'm not, I would be less concerned now since the closure of all the restaurants. However, all the takeout, right, like takeout and drive-through still open. So no, I would agree with you, Josh, on your points.
I just want to thank the organizer, Sandbox, for putting on this event. It's wonderful that I think we had quite a few attendees with really, really important questions. I want to thank you to all those who did attend. Thank you for participating. Thank you for getting involved and doing your part. I mean, there's a lot of questions that we didn't have a chance to get to. Once again, I would encourage you, please do reach out. We want to do our part to help you out and help guide you through this difficult time. And thanks to Janice. As always, your insight is invaluable. You've done a great job so far on this and acting as a leader on this important issue. And thanks to Jacklyn for putting together this PowerPoint, because I am not creative at all. And if you have anything you want to say before we sign off here, but.
Yeah, Josh, Jacklyn, Janice, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it today. Your insights have been super valuable. And, we just want to encourage everybody to continue to reach out to us at Sandbox Center. That's through social, info@sandboxcenter.com. That's with an R-E on the end, just to be clear. And we look forward to chatting again soon. Thank you guys so much for all your hard work and your efforts in putting this together on such a short timeline as well.
Yeah.
We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. We'll definitely be providing all the registrants with the slide deck and Janice's information too. I know she had mentioned she was going to forward some stuff that she had mentioned in the presentation, so we'll be sure to send that along to everybody who registered.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Take care.